Listen closely. Every person who pulls away, every avoidant who runs, is not running from you. They're running from themselves. Avoidance is a mask, a shield, a desperate attempt to keep control. But here's the truth. No one can run from what is real forever. Distance is not power. Silence is not strength. The longer they avoid, the louder their own soul speaks to them. And in that silence, they realize that what they left behind is exactly what they need most. Now, understand this. Love and connection are the deepest human needs. Avoidance may suppress it, they may push it down, but biology doesn't lie, psychology doesn't lie, the human heart doesn't lie. They crave intimacy just as much as you do, but fear tricks them into believing distance is safety. That fear always collapses under the weight of truth. When someone truly matters, their absence becomes unbearable. That's why the avoidant always circles back. Not because you chased, not because you begged, but because your presence is the medicine their avoidance cannot cure. But here's where the education lies. It's not about waiting for them, it's about rising within yourself. When you grow, when you heal, when you set unshakable boundaries, you shift the balance. You stop being a magnet of need and become a magnet of strength. And strength is irresistible. The avoidant returns because they see a new version of you. One they can't ignore, one they can't control, one they must respect. Avoidant behavior is driven by fear of vulnerability, not lack of care. This is a truth many people misunderstand when they experience someone pulling away from them. At first glance, it feels like rejection. It feels personal, as though you are unworthy of closeness or love. But in reality, the behavior is not about you. It is about the internal battles the avoidant person is fighting. Vulnerability requires courage. It demands openness, honesty, and the willingness to be seen fully, flaws and all. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, that level of exposure feels terrifying. They equate vulnerability with danger because somewhere in their past, closeness led to pain, disappointment, or loss. So instead of leaning in, they retreat. Instead of opening up, they shut down. Yet the mistake many make is to interpret that distance as evidence of indifference. That is not the case. Avoidants care deeply, often more deeply than they admit, but the very intensity of their emotions frightens them. It is easier to run than to risk being hurt. When you start to look at avoidance through the lens of fear rather than lack of love, everything changes. It is not that they cannot feel. It is that they are afraid of what those feelings will mean for their sense of control. Love and connection dismantle walls. And for someone who has lived behind emotional walls for so long, that dismantling feels unsafe. Imagine living in a fortress your entire life, believing the only way to survive is to stay guarded. Then one day, someone comes along and lights a fire inside that fortress, showing you the possibility of warmth, intimacy, and belonging. The fire feels good, but it also threatens to burn down the very walls you believe protect you. That is the dilemma of the avoidant, drawn to love, yet terrified of what surrendering to it could mean. From an educational perspective, this is rooted in attachment theory. Avoidant individuals often developed patterns early in life where their needs were not consistently met, or where expressing emotions was discouraged, dismissed, or even punished. As a result, they learned that self-reliance and emotional distance were safer strategies. The brain internalizes this pattern and repeats it in adulthood, even when circumstances have changed and genuine love is available. So, when you meet resistance, withdrawal, or silence, it is not because you are unworthy. It is because their nervous system has been conditioned to believe that closeness equals danger. This is a protective mechanism, not a reflection of your value. Understanding this does not mean you should excuse harmful behavior or lower your standards for connection. What it does mean is that you can begin to detach emotionally from the false belief that avoidance equals lack of love. It reframes the entire dynamic. Instead of feeling abandoned or unworthy, you begin to see the behavior as fear, driven, not truth, driven, and when you know this, you can step into your power. You no longer chase, beg, or prove your worth to someone who is stuck in their own cycle. Instead, you focus on your own healing, your own strength, and your own boundaries. By doing this, you shift the energy. You create a space where the avoidant is confronted with the reality of their own fears, rather than being shielded from them by your constant pursuit. The paradox is this: the very thing they are running from, vulnerability, intimacy, deep connection, is the very thing their heart longs for most. They may fight it, suppress it, deny it, but human nature always prevails. We are wired for connection, and no matter how strong the walls are, no matter how long they resist, love has a way of breaking through, but it begins with you understanding the truth. Avoidant behavior is not a sign of no care. It is a sign of deep fear. When you grasp this, you no longer waste your energy doubting your worth. Instead, you invest it into becoming the version of yourself that cannot be shaken by someone else's fear. And that is where real power and real freedom begins. Distance often creates clarity. Separation reveals what truly matters. In the moments when someone avoids you, withdraws from you, or creates space, it is easy to believe that this distance is the end of connection. But what we often miss is that distance has a way of stripping away illusions and exposing what is real. When someone is close, emotions can be clouded by daily interactions, by the comfort of routine, or by the noise of small conflicts. Yet, when separation happens, the heart is forced into silence, and in that silence, truth becomes louder. What was taken for granted suddenly becomes valuable. What felt ordinary suddenly becomes extraordinary. It is often in losing proximity to something, or someone, that we realize how deeply they anchor our lives. This is why avoidance can never erase genuine love. The avoidant may believe that by stepping back, by withdrawing, they are protecting themselves from vulnerability. But in reality, what they are doing is creating the very condition that reveals to them the weight of the bond they are trying to deny. Think of it like oxygen. When you are surrounded by it every day, you never think about breathing. But take it away for a few seconds, and suddenly the need for it becomes undeniable. That is what distance does in relationships. It removes the comfort of presence, forcing the heart and mind to acknowledge what has been there all along. For the one who has been left behind or pushed away, separation can feel like punishment, but it can also be reframed as a gift. It allows you to see more clearly too. Without the noise of constant interaction, you can reflect on your own needs, your own growth, and whether the relationship aligns with your highest values. Sometimes, in the pain of someone pulling away, you discover a strength and independence you never knew you had. Distance is a mirror. It reflects not only their fears, but also your capacity to rise above them. Psychologically, this process is rooted in contrast. Human beings only fully appreciate something when they experience its opposite. Joy feels richer after sadness. Light is brighter after darkness. Love becomes more valuable when contrasted with absence. This is why separation often creates the conditions for reconnection. The avoidant who believes their withdrawal will keep them safe ultimately discovers that it makes them feel empty. The one who is left behind, if they choose growth instead of despair, emerges stronger and more self-aware. Both parties are given the opportunity to see clearly what truly matters. The clarity that comes from distance is not always comfortable, but it is always transformative. It has the power to reset priorities, shift perspectives, and illuminate truths that were hidden in the comfort of closeness. The avoidant may run, but in the silence of separation, their heart speaks louder than their fear. They remember the laughter, the safety, the connection they tried to suppress. They realize that distance does not free them. It confronts them with the reality that what they are running from is exactly what they need. And for you, clarity means stepping into your own power. You stop confusing someone's avoidance with your worth. You see that love is not proven by chasing, but by standing strong in your own value. Separation reveals whether the bond was shallow or deep, temporary or lasting. It teaches you patience, resilience, and the ability to hold space for your own growth. Distance, then, is not the end. It is the crucible in which clarity is forged. And when clarity comes, there is no more running from the truth. What truly matters cannot be denied, no matter how far someone tries to escape. Emotional growth comes when avoidance is no longer sustainable. In the beginning, avoidance feels like a strategy that works. It gives temporary relief, a sense of control, and a way to escape vulnerability. The avoidant convinces themselves that shutting down, keeping distance, or withdrawing from intimacy will keep them safe. But over time, that very strategy becomes a trap. Avoidance does not solve the underlying fear, it only postpones it. Every time someone avoids intimacy, they also avoid the very experiences that could help them grow: connection, healing, and love. Eventually, the weight of loneliness and emptiness catches up, and avoidance can no longer provide protection. This is the breaking point where emotional growth begins. Growth rarely comes in moments of comfort. It is often born from struggle, from the realization that old patterns no longer work. For the avoidant, there comes a moment when running away does not silence the heart anymore. They may try to distract themselves, to replace what they left, or to bury their emotions under work, hobbies, or even new relationships. Yet the truth has a way of resurfacing. The ache of missed intimacy, the longing for genuine connection, and the recognition of what they lost all rise to the surface. At that moment, avoidance collapses under its own weight. What once felt like safety now feels like suffocation. Psychologically, this is the natural tension between fear and need. Human beings are wired for connection. The brain releases oxytocin when we bond, and our nervous system regulates itself through safe emotional closeness. Avoidance fights against this biological truth, but it cannot erase it. The longer someone resists, the more pressure builds within them, until they can no longer deny the need for closeness. This tension forces growth. It forces the avoidant to confront their fears, to question their patterns, and to choose between staying stuck in the cycle of withdrawal or breaking free into a healthier way of relating. For the person on the receiving end of avoidance, understanding this process is liberating. It shows you that their behavior is not a verdict on your worth, but a reflection of their internal struggle. It also teaches you patience, not the patience of waiting endlessly, but the patience to allow someone else's journey to unfold without trying to control it. Your role is not to fix the avoidant or drag them into connection, but to focus on your own growth. When you choose to heal, to set boundaries, and to rise into your full strength, you create an environment where avoidance becomes less sustainable for them. They see that their patterns no longer work on you. They recognize that the distance they create only highlights the gap between who they are and who they want to be. Emotional growth is a painful but necessary transformation. It often starts with loss, losing someone they pushed away, losing the comfort of their walls, or losing the illusion that avoidance can keep them safe. But on the other side of that loss is an awakening. It is the moment they realize that true safety does not come from distance. It comes from trust, intimacy, and courage. And for you, growth means no longer waiting for someone else to change in order for you to feel whole. You grow by refusing to shrink yourself to fit their fears. When avoidance is no longer sustainable, a choice must be made. Continue repeating the same patterns or step into growth. And the truth is, most people, when faced with the emptiness of avoidance, eventually choose growth. They return, they seek connection, or they learn to open their hearts in new ways. Emotional growth, then, is not optional. It is inevitable, because the human spirit was never designed to live behind walls forever. Strength is found in holding your boundaries, not chasing validation. When someone you care about withdraws or avoids closeness, the natural instinct is to pursue, to explain yourself, or to prove your worth. This comes from the human desire to restore connection, but in reality, chasing does the opposite of what you intend. It signals that your sense of value is tied to their approval, and it teaches them that they can control the dynamic by pulling away. True strength is not found in bending yourself to earn someone's attention. It is found in standing firmly in your worth, knowing that love and respect are not things to be begged for, but things that flow naturally when a relationship is healthy and mutual. Boundaries are not walls, they are standards. They are the invisible lines that communicate how you expect to be treated, what you will accept, and what you will not tolerate. Holding your boundaries is an act of self-respect, and it sends a powerful message, not only to others, but to yourself. It tells the world, I value myself enough not to settle for less than I deserve. When you embody this, people feel it. It shifts the dynamic entirely. Instead of chasing validation outside of you, you radiate confidence and strength from within. That energy is magnetic. For the avoidant, this is deeply unsettling, but also deeply awakening. Their withdrawal may have once created control, but when you refuse to chase, you break that cycle. You teach them that distance will not draw you in, and silence will not diminish your sense of worth. They are then left with two choices: continue to run and face the emptiness that comes with it, or rise to meet you at the level of respect and vulnerability you demand. Either way, by holding your boundaries, you ensure you never lose yourself in the process of loving someone else. Psychologically, this is about self-validation versus external validation. People who constantly seek approval are operating from a place of insecurity, always needing someone else to confirm their value. But self-validation flips the script. It means you no longer rely on another's acceptance to feel whole. You know who you are, you know what you bring, and you know you are enough. This inner certainty is what allows you to enforce boundaries with calm strength instead of anger or desperation. Boundaries are also educational for the other person. When someone avoids or withdraws, they expect the old cycle to continue. You chase, they pull, and the dance repeats. But when you stop playing the role, they are confronted with themselves. They are forced to sit with their fears, their choices, and the consequences of their behavior. This is often the very catalyst for change, not because you demanded it, but because you refuse to abandon your standards. Strength in boundaries is not about punishment. It is about alignment. It is about making sure your life is filled with relationships that honor your value rather than drain it. It also builds resilience. Every time you choose to honor your boundaries instead of chasing validation, you strengthen the belief within yourself that you are worthy of healthy love. Over time, this rewires your own patterns and makes you a magnet for people who are capable of showing up fully. The irony is that the more you stop chasing, the more powerfully you attract. The avoidant realizes that the control they once had is gone, and what is left is the truth. If they want connection, they must rise, they must face vulnerability, and they must choose courage over fear. And even if they never return, your boundaries ensure that you never shrink, never settle, and never lose sight of who you are. That is real strength, the kind that cannot be taken away because it comes from within, not from anyone else's validation. True love and connection demand courage and accountability. It is easy to talk about love as though it is simply an emotion, something that flows naturally without effort. But real love goes far beyond feelings. It requires action, responsibility, and the willingness to face fear head on. Love is not just about passion in the good moments. It is about showing up consistently, even when it feels uncomfortable, and this is where courage comes in. To truly connect with another human being, you must be willing to let down your guard, to expose your vulnerabilities, and to risk rejection. Without courage, love cannot deepen, because intimacy only thrives in truth, and truth cannot exist behind masks. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this feels incredibly difficult. Avoidance is a strategy to protect the heart from the pain of being seen too closely or needing someone too much. But avoiding intimacy also means avoiding growth. Love demands that we step into the unknown, and that requires courage. It is not about the absence of fear. It is about moving forward in spite of it. Choosing to stay present when the instinct is to run, choosing to communicate when silence feels safer, and choosing to commit when doubt whispers excuses. This is the true bravery that builds lasting relationships. Accountability is the other side of the coin. Courage without accountability can become reckless, but accountability grounds love in integrity. It means taking responsibility for your actions, your words, and the way you show up in the relationship. Too often, people believe that love will survive on chemistry alone, but without accountability, connection becomes fragile. When mistakes happen, and they always do, accountability is what restores trust. It is saying, "I was wrong, I hurt you, I will do better." These words are not signs of weakness, they are signs of maturity and strength. Accountability transforms love from a fleeting emotion into a dependable bond. From a psychological perspective, courage and accountability counteract the very patterns that avoidance creates. Avoidance thrives on denial, withdrawal, and blame shifting, but courage and accountability demand honesty, presence, and ownership. They dismantle the protective walls that prevent intimacy and replace them with the building blocks of genuine connection. Without them, relationships remain shallow and unstable. With them, love becomes a safe container where both people can grow, heal, and thrive together. For you, this keynote is also a lesson in what to expect and what to demand in love. Do not settle for connection that requires you to carry all the weight, to chase, or to accept half-truths. Real love is reciprocal. It is a two-way street where both people choose courage over fear and accountability over excuses. If someone cannot meet you at that level, it does not mean you are unworthy. It means they are not yet ready to embrace the depth that true love requires. Courage and accountability also start with yourself. Are you willing to face your own fears, to admit your own mistakes, and to grow into the highest version of yourself in love? The answer to this question determines the quality of the connections you create. Because when you embody courage and accountability, you set the standard. You show others what love should look like, and you attract relationships that reflect the strength you carry within. At the heart of it all, true love is not passive. It is active, intentional, and resilient. It takes courage to open the heart and accountability to keep it open. And when both partners embrace these qualities, connection transforms from something fragile into something unshakable. That is the difference between temporary attraction and a bond that lasts a lifetime. When you grow, heal, and elevate, the avoidant has no choice but to return, or be left behind by your transformation. This truth is not about revenge, manipulation, or proving a point. It is about the natural law of energy and attraction. People are drawn to strength, wholeness, and authenticity. When you shift from pain to power, you change the dynamic entirely. The avoidant, who once believed that distance gave them control, begins to feel the imbalance in a new way. They sense that you are no longer waiting, no longer shrinking, no longer chained to their patterns. You rise into a version of yourself that cannot be ignored, and in that rise, they are faced with two options: grow to meet you or stay trapped in the old cycle and lose you forever. Growth is magnetic because it signals freedom. When you heal your wounds instead of clinging to them, when you elevate your mindset instead of staying stuck in fear, you radiate a different kind of energy. That energy communicates self-respect, confidence, and emotional maturity. The avoidant who once ran from intimacy suddenly sees that your life is moving forward with or without them. That realization shakes their sense of security. They realize they cannot use distance to control you anymore because you no longer operate from need, you operate from choice. This is the turning point where avoidance begins to collapse, and the pull toward reconnection becomes almost inevitable. But the beauty of this process is that your growth is not about them at all. It is about you. Healing means reclaiming the parts of yourself that were once fragmented by fear, rejection, or abandonment. Elevation means stepping into your higher self, the version of you that sets boundaries, lives with purpose, and radiates inner strength. When you do this, you stop asking whether the avoidant will return, and you start asking whether they even deserve a place in the new life you are building. That shift in perspective is where true empowerment lies. Psychologically, this dynamic is rooted in self-differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self while being in relationship with others. People who chase avoidance often lose themselves in the process, bending and shrinking to keep the connection alive. But when you grow, you break that cycle. You hold your identity firmly, and you communicate through action that you are complete on your own. The avoidant is then confronted with the reality that the old dance no longer works. Their distance no longer creates fear in you. Instead, it only highlights the gap between who you have become and who they are willing to be. This is why transformation is the most powerful response to avoidance. You cannot force someone to change, you cannot beg them into intimacy, but you can evolve into a version of yourself that makes avoidance unsustainable. The avoidant returns not because you pleaded, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. And if they do not return, it is only because they chose fear over courage, denial over truth. Either way, you win because your transformation sets you free. At the core of it, this is about reclaiming your power. You cannot control whether someone comes back, but you can control how you rise. And the higher you rise, the clearer it becomes. Those who are meant to stay will meet you at your level, and those who cannot will fall away. That is not loss, it is alignment. So focus on your healing, your growth, your elevation. Because when you do, the avoidant has no choice. They will either step into the light with you or be left behind in the shadows of their own fear.